Hi, you're watching Floyd Steinberg's YouTube channel, and today let's take a look at the Modulox open source software modular synthesizer platform. I've got the center part, the brain, here for review, which can run a number of firmwares, turning this into a granular or virtual analog synthesizer and many more. So if you think that's interesting, please join me in this video. Here we go. The Modulox Brain is the center part of Raspberry Audio's new modular series, and the idea here is you can buy a number of similar sized controllers that snap on magnetically, forming a grid. The Brain, which can run a number of software synthesizers and samplers, comes with a 340x240 pixel color screen, headphone and microphone in, TRS MIDI in and out, a USB Type-C port for power and MIDI, mini speaker and microphone, and a clickable encoder and 4 buttons for navigating the menu. There's an SD card slot as well here for storing samples and patches. On Raspberry Audio's webpage, you can install one of 6 open source firmwares currently available: a sampler, a virtual analog synth, FN and granular synthesizer, an organ emulator, and Moduloid, a port of the old Akai arcade game popular in the 80s. Installing the firmware is really simple. Just press the encoder while inserting a USB cable connected to your computer. Then select the firmware you want to install, click Connect, choose the USB JTAG device, and there you go. You can now unplug the USB cable and reconnect it, booting your new synthesizer. Okay, so here we have the Modulox Brain running the granular firmware, which Raspberry Audio wanted me to use in this video first. So let's take a look at that. This is connected to my Yamaha montage, which will act as a MIDI controller only here, and the audio out is going into my Zoom R20 recorder for capturing all the audio in this video. We have 4 buttons here for navigating the menus and an encoder for choosing values, and if you press the menu button, you will then open up a menu where you can navigate to submenus using these cursor keys here. So for example, if I want to select a sample for my granular synthesizer here, it's this screen, and you will then directly go to this sample selection screen. But before we do that, let's listen to these presets here. So what's going on here? This is a granular sampler, so we're using a sample and chopping it up into tiny bits, which are called grains, and then you can set the starting point, the end point, the grain size, which is the length of those microscopic samples. We can choose an envelope, grain density, grain rate, sample rate, grain randomness, which will slightly move the starting point about. There's also an effect here. We have a delay effect, so we can choose the delay time, delay feedback, delay dry and wetness. We also have a filter, so we have different filter types to choose from here, filter resonance, and there's also an LFO where you can set up what the LFO should affect. Let's put this on filter cutoff frequency, and now we can choose a waveform here, the LFO speed, and the strength of the LFO, and the strength on the cutoff. And we also have an envelope, so we can choose attack, decay, sustain, and release. We can also adjust the volume, and then we can save a sound. Right. One thing you can do here is you can assign all these parameters to MIDI controls. So to do that, just push the encoder here. And now I can just move one of these encoders here and push this encoder again. And now we can change the grain size while playing. Let's listen to this. We can do the same thing for grain envelope, and for grain density, and for grain rate, and for sample rate, and for randomness. Yeah, let's try to modify this sound using these controllers here. Alright, let's assign one of these to filter color frequency. I think I used the mod wheel for this one. Here's another example. I've loaded a metallophone sample into the Modulox Brain, and I've assigned all the parameters to these 8 controls here, and also to the mod wheel. And now I can just change the starting and the end point of the sample using these encoders. Let's add some external effects. Let's take a quick look at the other firmwares. The virtual analog synth is my favorite of them. You can see me switching through all the menus here. This is an 8-voice, 3-oscillator synth that also is by Timbro, so you can play up to 2 patches simultaneously. You can use 3 freely assignable envelopes and LFOs to shape your sounds, and every parameter can be assigned to a MIDI controller. You can also choose from a wide variety of wave shapes that all support pulse width modulation. There's also a monophonic mode, which lets you detune all the oscillators for extra fat sounds. I've used that on the bass drone in the next demo. As all the other synths, this one has a delay and distortion effect built in. Right. Here's the demo. I've recorded 4 parts, one after the other for this, and added an external delay effect. There's also an 8-track sampler, and while I couldn't get it to capture samples using the built-in microphone, which will most likely be possible when the Modulox Brain releases in April 25, I can show you how to transfer samples using the built-in Wi-Fi adapter. Connect your Modulox Brain to your computer by USB, then open the Wi-Fi menu on your computer, open the Modulox app page and connect to the hardware. You can now select the network to connect to. On the sampler, Select the Load Samples menu now, and then you should be able to open the web page the sampler is showing you on its display. Here you can now drop all the samples in wave mono format for use in your current project. One thing I have to mention is that while making this video, it's still some months till launch, so both the firmware and the hardware had some minor issues. For example, it wasn't possible to fully push in the 3.5mm audio cable because there was an embossed headphone icon on the enclosure which held back the plug. All the firmwares I tried had minor issues as well, mostly related to TRS MIDI, which always reacted kind of sluggish, even made the synth crash. I have to say though that Raspberry Audio was always quick to fix these issues once I reported them. So I'm quite optimistic for the future release of this device. All things said, the concept is really great and the user interface is easy enough to grasp. And personally I like the virtual analog synth most. I would have liked to show you the magnetic snap-on controllers as well, but it wasn't possible at this time. So I hope I'll have the opportunity to do that later this year. I'd say this project is worth keeping an eye on. All the links are in this video's description. Yeah, and that's it for today. The Modulox open source synthesizer platform. In some places it's still a bit rough around the edges, literally, but I think the price is right and the future potential is there. So if you think this was an interesting YouTube video, please do the YouTube thing. You can also support me on Patreon or buy my music on Bandcamp or stream my music on streaming services like Spotify or Apple Music. As always, thanks for watching and see you again very soon. Bye bye.